You are taught that a diamond ring is an ancient, unbreakable symbol of love. You are told that its breathtaking price tag is simply a reflection of its extreme rarity in nature. It is a beautiful story, repeated in movies, magazines, and jewelry stores around the world. But if you look past the romantic surface and open the financial ledgers of the late 19th century, a much colder, much more calculated reality begins to emerge. What if the tradition of the diamond engagement ring was not born out of romance, but out of a desperate financial crisis? What if the concept of eternal love was weaponized by a London banking cartel to prevent a global market collapse? Today, we are going to open the missing chapter of the diamond industry. We are not going to look at the sparkle of the stone. We are going to look at the credit lines, the secret agreements, and the corporate wars that built the greatest illusion in the history of modern capitalism. Because when you trace the money, you will find that love might be eternal, but the price of a diamond was entirely engineered by a monopoly that never wanted you to know the truth. In the late 1860s, a young boy found a shiny stone on the banks of the Orange River in South Africa. That single stone triggered the greatest diamond rush in human history. Within a few years, tens of thousands of prospectors descended upon a dry, dusty farm owned by the De Beer brothers. They dug with picks and shovels, creating the Great Kimberley Mine, which would soon be known as the Big Hole. On the surface, this was a story of sudden, unimaginable wealth. But inside the financial capitals of Europe, this discovery triggered absolute panic. Before the Kimberley strike, diamonds were genuinely rare. They were found in tiny quantities in the riverbeds of India and the jungles of Brazil. Because they were scarce, they held immense value for European royalty and the ultra-rich. But the South African mines were not producing a few stones. They were producing tons of them. More diamonds were pulled out of the dirt in Kimberley in a single decade than had been found in the previous 2,000 years of human history. In the cold logic of economics, when supply becomes infinite, value drops to zero. The investors, the financiers, and the mine owners realized a terrifying truth. Diamonds were not rare anymore. They were just shiny pieces of carbon, as common as coal. If the market was flooded, the price of a diamond would crash, wiping out millions of pounds of investments overnight. The commodity was depreciating rapidly, and the only way to save it was to stop the free market from functioning. Someone needed to take control of every single mine, lock the diamonds in a vault, and artificially restrict the supply. But to buy out every independent miner in South Africa required a level of capital that simply did not exist on the African continent. It required the ultimate financial weapon. It required the Rothschilds. Enter Cecil Rhodes, a highly ambitious, ruthlessly pragmatic British businessman. Rhodes understood that the diamond market was facing a liquidity crisis. He knew that whoever could consolidate the mines would control the global price of the stone. But his rival, a flamboyant entrepreneur named Barney Barnato, was also buying up claims at a rapid pace. To defeat Barnato, Rhodes needed an overwhelming financial advantage. In 1887, Rhodes travelled to London, seeking an audience with Lord Nathaniel de Rothschild, the head of the most powerful banking dynasty in the world. Rhodes did not pitch a mining venture. He pitched a global cartel. He explained that if they did not monopolize the supply, the diamond industry would collapse under its own weight. Lord Rothschild saw the logic in the ledger. He issued a massive line of credit, amounting to millions of pounds, effectively giving Rhodes a blank check to buy out the entire South African diamond industry. With the financial backing of the Rothschild Empire, Rhodes cornered Barney Barnato, forcing him into a merger. In 1888, De Beers Consolidated Mines was officially born. It was not just a company. It was a corporate leviathan, controlling roughly 90% of the world's rough diamond production. But mining the diamonds was only half the equation. To control the price, Rhodes needed to control the distribution. In 1890, De Beers established the London Diamond Syndicate. This was a highly secretive group of diamond merchants, hand-picked by De Beers and the Rothschilds. The mechanism of power was brilliantly simple and entirely ruthless. De Beers would mine the diamonds in South Africa, but they would not sell them to the open market. Instead, they shipped the rough stones to the syndicate in London. The syndicate would lock the diamonds in massive underground vaults. They would only release a tiny, carefully calculated trickle of stones into the market each year. This was the birth of artificial scarcity. The syndicate dictated the price, and if a buyer refused to pay, they were permanently banned from doing business with De Beers. They created an illusion that diamonds were incredibly hard to find, while millions of carats were sitting quietly in darkness under the streets of London. But by the 1930s, the De Beers monopoly faced a new, existential threat. The Great Depression had devastated the global economy. People were struggling to buy bread, let alone luxury gems. Furthermore, new diamond deposits were being discovered in other parts of Africa and the Soviet Union. The supply was increasing, but the demand was dying. De Beers realized that controlling the supply was no longer enough. They had to control the human mind. They had to invent a reason for average, working-class people to spend their life savings on a useless stone. In 1938, Harry Oppenheimer, the new head of De Beers, traveled to New York. He hired N.W. Ayer & Son, one of the most powerful public relations firms in the United States. The objective was not just to sell a product. The objective was to engineer a cultural tradition from scratch. N.W. Ayer conducted psychological research and realized that they needed to link the diamond to the most powerful human emotion, romantic love. They began placing diamonds on the fingers of Hollywood actresses. They paid screenwriters to include scenes where men proposed with diamond rings. They sent educational materials to high schools, teaching young girls that a diamond was the ultimate symbol of a man's commitment. They even dictated the financial rule, running advertisements suggesting that a man should spend exactly 2 months' salary on a ring. It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation, disguised as romance. But the true genius of the N.W. Ayer campaign was not just about getting people to buy diamonds. It was about making sure they never, ever sold them. Diamonds have very little intrinsic value. If the public suddenly decided to sell their old jewelry, a secondary market would be created. This secondary market would bypass the De Beers monopoly, flood the world with second-hand stones, and crash the global price. To prevent this, N.W. Ayer needed to turn a highly liquid asset into a completely illiquid asset. They needed to convince the public that selling a diamond was a betrayal of love itself. In 1947, a young copywriter named Francis Geraghty coined the 4 words that would secure the De Beers empire forever. A diamond is forever. It is considered the greatest advertising slogan of the 20th century. But historically, it is a brilliant piece of financial engineering. By convincing you that a diamond is forever, they convinced you to lock your capital in a drawer, removing it from the open market permanently. You buy it at a massive markup, but you can never sell it, because it is no longer a stone, it is a sacred symbol. The public bought the illusion, hook, line, and sinker. But while Hollywood stars flashed their rings on the silver screen, the true cost of this illusion was being paid in blood, on the African continent. The missing chapter of the diamond trade is written in sovereign blood. To maintain their absolute grip on the South African soil, Cecil Rhodes did not just act as a businessman. He acted as a corporate state. He used the profits from De Beers to fund the British South Africa Company, an imperial corporation with its own private army. When the neighboring Boer republics, independent states established by Dutch settlers, discovered massive gold and diamond reserves within their borders, Rhodes realized that this new wealth could threaten British dominance and, more importantly, threaten the De Beers monopoly. The desire to control these resource-rich territories was a direct catalyst for the brutal Boer War at the dawn of the 20th century. It is often taught as a war of empire, a clash of national pride. But if you look at the ledger books, it was a war to secure the mineral wealth of a continent for the shareholders in London. Tens of thousands of Boer civilians were forced into the world's first concentration camps, where starvation and disease wiped out entire families. But the deepest tragedy fell upon the indigenous black population. To maximize profits and prevent diamond theft, De Beers pioneered the closed compound system. Black African miners were stripped of their rights, forced into heavily guarded labor camps, and essentially treated as prisoners during their contracts. They dug the earth in horrific conditions, dying in rockfalls and from disease, to extract the stones that would soon symbolize eternal romance in the West. The architecture of these corporate labor camps laid the direct foundation for the system of apartheid that would oppress South Africa for decades. This is the hidden ledger of the Diamond Syndicate. The tradition you were taught to cherish was not handed down by ancient ancestors. It was drafted in the boardrooms of London and New York. It was financed by the Rothschild credit lines. It was enforced by imperial armies and the systemic exploitation of African labor. And it was packaged into a neat, glittering box by a PR firm on Madison Avenue. A geopolitical decision, or a cultural tradition, rarely emerges in a vacuum. It usually begins as a way to solve a crisis of oversupply, a crisis of depreciating assets, a crisis of corporate survival. And then one day, a financial strategy becomes so deeply embedded in our minds that we mistake a cartel's profit margin for the ultimate expression of love. You think you are buying a timeless symbol of devotion, but the historical record shows you are simply paying the final invoice for one of the most ruthless and successful monopolies that has ever existed on Earth. Do you think a diamond is still a symbol of true love once you know its financial history, or is it just the most successful psychological operation in human history? Let me know in the comments below.